Welcome to co-video number 2. So in this one, I'm going to be hopefully trying to recommend to you something which I think is even more profound and useful to you than the world's best antiviral mask that I mentioned in the last video. So my very wonderful sister, who is also a very wonderful psychologist, sent me a link to the work of a guy called Thomas Hubl, Hubl, Thomas Hubl. Link in the description below. So I was initially skeptical. I don't know if you're like me, and when you receive somebody else's tip in the form of a webinar and you go to it and you politely have a look at it and think it's not for me. So that may be true in this instance also. But I would definitely recommend that you check this out. So Thomas Hubl is responsible, among other things, for a series of 3 videos under the collective title of collectivetraumaseries.com. Link in the description below. And I find this the most articulate and profound description and articulation of the possibilities that COVID and in Australia the bushfires and now this explosion in Lebanon and all of the other trials and tribulations, almost biblical trials and tribulations that we've been facing over the last few years. Not to mention the one that perhaps underpins many, if not all of them, which is the huge disaster which is just waiting to happen, which is climate change. So what Thomas is so successful in doing is combining, I think, the worlds of psychology, of Buddhism, of spirituality, of physiology. It's fairly intellectual stuff and could be a bit esoteric, but he is just such a great speaker and just such a great embodiment of the concepts that he's advocating. So it's all about a kind of new world order that I think a lot of people have been alluding to, and a lot of people are getting to from different angles. But I think that Mr. Hubl's version is the most advanced articulation of what we need to do. So his theorem is all about the thing that we're all very familiar with now, which is trauma. But he goes far enough in definitively delineating that so many of us are victims of trauma. You don't have to have done a couple of spells in Nam or be a victim of sexual or other child abuse to suffer from trauma or PTSD. His version is in line with my experience, which is that something which traumatizes one person might not traumatize another because of the resources that those 2 different individuals might have. So what he is advocating, which is different from what's happened up till now, is he is saying that everyone has to do their own work on their own trauma, their own individual work, but that out of that and from that and in parallel with that and complementary to that is this new field of collective trauma healing. And it sounds a bit vague and amorphous because there's very little examples of it. What we have had is collective movements. So we've had, very positive, by and large, movements like Me Too and Black Lives Matter and a variety of others. But they tend to be polarizing rather than uniting. And so what Thomas is working on and advocating and trying to imagine is the possibility for ways of bringing about change and healing trauma that are not necessarily so conflictual. And if you're wondering what on earth is Henry or Thomas talking about, we're talking about things that you might well do online. So although, as he puts it in such a lovely way, like human beings, the internet has its shadow side, so the Jungian shadow side, but it's also a miraculous technology that will allow and facilitate the solution to many of our problems. So it's a two-edged sword. But for instance, he is instrumental with many other like-minded speakers and thinkers in running a symposium, a conference next month on collective healing of trauma. This is something you can sign up for. There is no charge, there is no catch, and I would highly recommend that if you're not sure what I'm talking about, but you like the idea that you might be able to heal your own trauma or other people's trauma at the same time, and ultimately on a global rather than just a personal or local level, then I would advocate listening to, watching his 3 webinars, which come under collectivetraumaseries.com, and then also signing up for the World of Possibility that is the 2020 Collective Trauma Healing Symposium or Conference. So love to know what you think about all this, particularly if you get to watch one of his webinars. I would be really interested to hear what you think.